Hi everybody, I'm Amy from the Cauldron, and in today's episode of Dye Time I have in here a yarn cake which is 75% superwash merino, 15% nylon, 10% silver stellina. That I wound this myself and it is already starting to untangle, never mind. And while it's not warm enough to do solar dyeing, I thought I'd do a little bit of cool vat dyeing with this. The main reason for this is because my stove is full at the moment. I'm waiting for some water to boil so I can go do another project, and I'm just getting a bit impatient. I have here just over 100 millilitres of leftover radioactive acid dye from Dharma. It was a 1% depth of shade when I first made it up. This means that there was 1 gram of dye per 100 millilitres of water. It's probably still pretty close to that now, but it's not exact. So I'm just going to put that in there. Let's get some more water. I'm just going to fill this up with water now. Well, at least until the yarn is covered. So, there we go. That's approximately 300 millilitres of water in there. It's not really that important. I'm going to put some vinegar in here now. So I'll put 2 tablespoons of vinegar in there for now. Now all the equipment I'm using here is dedicated for dyeing. Don't use it for food. So I'm just going to leave this now for probably a day or two. I'm not expecting all the dye to absorb to the yarn, to bind to the yarn, because it's not that hot. Because it's March and it's still very cold. But yeah, I'll come back to this in a day or two, and then I will heat set this and then see where we go from there, because I don't currently have any plans for this. This has been sitting here in this jar for 2 days now. As it is still very cold here in the UK, all the dye hasn't bound to the yarn. I wasn't expecting it to. So now let's go and heat set this. I have here my dedicated dye saucepan, and I'm just going to add everything to it. If my yarn cake doesn't get stuck in there. Right, let's have a little look. Probably should be wearing gloves right now. Looks like there may be some dye that's bound to the yarn, but because it's not been hot enough, it just won't bind all the dye to the yarn. This is going to be a nightmare to untangle. But it is what it is. Now, this is obviously not enough water, so I'm just going to keep adding water in here. I want the yarn cake to be covered in water. There we go, almost there. There we go. I don't know how much water I have added, but now I'm just going to heat this up, and hopefully the rest of that dye will bind to the yarn. This has been on the heat for about 40 minutes or so, and you can see it's still quite yellow in there. I haven't used radioactive much. I know that Purple Pop and Fluorescent Fuchsia, which are 2 other fluorescent dyes, do take a long time to bind to the yarn. So I'm guessing radioactive is similar. So what I'm going to do now is, for now, I'm going to cover this and turn off the heat, and then I'm going to transfer this to one of my other pans so that I can use this pot for steaming. This has cooled down now, and as you can see, there is still a tiny hint of yellow in there. I don't think that yellow is going to bind to the yarn at all. So let's tip that out, and I'm not going to wash this completely. I'm going to squeeze it out. I'm going to just run it under a little bit of cold water, because I'm expecting there will be a little bit of bleeding because it was sitting in that yellow liquid. Although, it's actually looking all right. So I'm going to let this dry now as it is, and then I can reskein it and then either wash it properly or maybe dye it again. We'll see what this looks like when it is dry. Now, I let this yarn sit on the radiator in a cake
form for probably about 2 days, and then I very gently unwound it into this skein as it was still a little bit damp in the middle and I didn't want to stretch the yarn. I haven't washed this again and it still smells quite a lot like vinegar. But if we have a little look at how this has dyed up, you can see there's some really lovely dark green and some fades, some sort of paler greens going down. And then you get to sort of the point where there's more white than green and there's just some little green flecks all the way through. Now, I really like this, but I'm also quite curious to see what would happen if I recaked this with the darkest green on the inside and dyed it again a different colour. So that's what I'm going to do, and it's one of the reasons why I haven't washed this properly yet. I will do that later. So now I'm going to go recake this and dye it a second colour. Still haven't decided what that's going to be yet.
I have recaked this with the green on the inside that was on the outside. And you can see there is green all the way through, but it is mostly bare yarn on the outside now. So I'm going to add in my dye. This looks like a lot of dye. I don't know exactly how much it is. It was leftover stock. It came up to probably about there on my jug, so maybe a little bit less than 50 millilitres. But it was 1% depth shade of magenta acid dye from DT Craft and Design. There was dye on the bottom of here that had come out of solution and stuck to the bottom. So I used some warm water to dissolve that, and it looks like I've got most of it now. So I wouldn't like to say how much dye is actually in here. So I need my tongs before I go any further. Right, you can see this is dry. So I'm just trying to hold this down. I don't want to squeeze it too much, but ooh, look at that magenta. A little of this dye goes a long way, so I'm not concerned. I'm sure there is plenty of dye for this. And let's flip it over. I am going to add some more water. Hopefully that'll be enough to submerge it. Almost. There is no acid in here because I haven't washed this yarn, so there is still plenty of acid in the yarn. It really smells of vinegar. Oh, and it's starting to untangle already. Ugh. Oh well. That happened last time and I was able to untangle it, so I'm hoping it's not going to be too bad. Add in a bit more water. There we go, that's submerged now. I'm not going to add any acid yet. I'm going to let this come up to just below a boil and then let it simmer for probably 30-40 minutes. See how it goes, see how long it takes for this dye to absorb. If after about 30-40 minutes on the heat it hasn't absorbed everything, I might add some more acid then. But for now, I'm going to cover it up, let it get up to temperature, and then just leave it. This has been on the heat for about 40 minutes now, and as you can see, there is still quite a lot of pink in there. You can see that is a gorgeous colour on that. And if you look at the water runoff, there's a bit of a hint of pink in there, but not much. So the pink is binding to the yarn, which I'm really happy about. I am going to add a couple of extra tablespoons of vinegar because it won't hurt. There's an extra 3 tablespoons of vinegar in there. And I'm just going to leave this for another 30-40 minutes and see how we go from there. This pink does take quite a long time to bind. And because there's not much surface area here, there is 100 grams here, but it's not wound as a skein, it is as a cake, so there's not actually as much surface area here as there would normally be if I was dyeing 100 grams of yarn. So it's taking the dye longer to get through to the yarn in the middle. We'll check back in about 30-40 minutes. This has been on the heat for about an extra half an hour, and you can see there is very little dye left in that dye bath, which I'm really happy. That pink is so pretty. I really love it. So all I'm going to do now is turn the heat off, let it cool down, and then I can start to wash this. This yarn is still a bit warm in here, but it's cooled down enough, and you can see the rest of that dye has absorbed into the yarn. There seems to be a slight yellowish hint of dye left in there. That's probably from the green. So all I'm going to do now is just squeeze this out through some water. Yeah, it's actually feeling a lot looser than this cake is actually feeling a lot looser. So I wonder if it's unwound a bit. Now it doesn't look like there's any dye coming off here, which is good. So what I'm going to do is just let this dry, and then I can wind it into a skein and then wash it properly. Oh, look, there is still green, and it looks like there's still some white right there in the middle as well.
And here is the finished yarn. I'm so happy with this. This turned out better than I could have imagined. We've got this beautiful dark pink there are some paler flecks of pink sort of in that bit, and then it goes through to the pink gets paler, and there are more white flecks through it and green flecks, and then you get to this point where it's really, really sort of mottled from where the yarn was twisted over itself, all the way through to these lovely green sections where there's just some patches of pink. It's fantastic and I love it. There's no green on this end where the pink was on the outside. This was a darker pink, well, a darker colour, and it did over dye that. But I don't think that's ruined it, because look at that amazing colour progression. I love it. I think this is amazing. And I think I could quite easily replicate this. It wouldn't be identical because of the way the yarn would be wound and how it would absorb the dye, but I know roughly how much dye was used in this, so I think it could be replicated to make something very similar. It wouldn't be identical, but it would certainly be very similar. This was fun. I definitely want to do this again with other colours. What colours would you like me to do this with next time? Leave a comment down below and I will pick some colours to dye with. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Do please click like and subscribe to this channel. Make sure you've got notifications turned on so you don't miss any new videos. I publish a new video every Monday, and it's usually around about 6 PM UK time. And I like to do different things in my videos. So one day I might do something like this where I'm dyeing a cake of yarn. I may dye unspun fibre. Another week I might dye a t-shirt or mix different techniques together. You know, there's all sorts of things that I like to experiment with, so there should always be something interesting to watch. Thank you so much for watching.